2 buildings, 2 kinds of haunted. 1, an old care home with apparitions and choking elevator rides. The other, a tiny Toronto flat with bangs, smells, and a TV that turns on by itself. Want to know which felt worse? Let's dive in. My first job was in the kitchen of an assisted living home that has been operating since 1896. It started as a home for elderly women and since had an addition built on for semi-assisted apartments. The main building, I was warned after starting about potential paranormal activity within the building and had disregarded it. Clearly more frightened that I was expected to use an elevator from the 60s that would randomly break down with you in it, which I later learned was the wrong thing to be worried about. The first haunting I learned about, I did not directly experience. There was one room upstairs that no one liked going in. The resident was a very religious woman and would often call for personal care constantly for help because the spirits she claimed to be in the room with her. She would say the devil was trying to kill her. Staff who had been in the room have claimed to hear growling and whispers over their walkie-talkie systems. Halfway through my time there, this resident was moved to a different room, and even this one stayed empty, and we would often hear knocking. Never found anyone inside. My first personal sighting is also on the top floor of the original building, though it has been determined to be a common and separate apparition from whatever lived in that room. The kitchen staff was expected to regularly stock mini fridges throughout the building with cold drinks. The top floor's hall are laid out in an H shape, and the fridge is directly between the 2 long halls. One day, a very solid-looking woman floated across the end of the hall. She was dressed in a white Victorian-era gown, her hair pinned in an updo. But she had no feet. She floated about a foot off from the ground before disappearing. Most of the staff have witnessed this particular apparition. I since had refused to stock this fridge alone. Then there were the shadow people. I alternated between the kitchen's opening shift, 5 a.m., and the closing shift that ended at 7 p.m. I would often be left alone in the kitchen and dining room. On multiple occasions, I would see dark masses move between tables and between hallways to the storage rooms. One night, I was alone mopping for closing and saw a large male-shaped dark mass walk across the kitchen and stand across the stoves from me. It stood there for 2 to 3 minutes, watching me as I watched it. It would occasionally move, ducking behind the stove before standing back up, as if playing some messed up version of peekaboo. Having had a strange interest in the paranormal in my youth, I have heard from multiple sources that the shadow people often go to places of great sadness or other negative energy to prey on children and the elderly. There were multiple occasions over the year I worked at. My coworkers and I have seen them throughout the kitchen. Before leaving this job, there were 2 other one-off experiences in the main building centering around the death of 2 residents. The first was in the early morning. I had spotted a full-body apparition of her sitting in her assigned dining chair, her eyes completely black. I found out an hour later that she had been moved to a hospital over the weekend and had passed earlier that morning. The second was another resident had fallen in her shower and passed at the hospital later that night. For the next week, her shower call bell rang at the hour she had passed. The apartments were an extremely new addition compared to the main part of the home. A neighboring house had been torn down to construct it and the new parking lot. Though many of us have agreed that whatever resides in that building is something very old and very sinister, we do not think this is the spirit of a resident. Once a day, the main kitchen serves a meal to the apartments. This is in a small activity room in the basement of their building, near the laundry and storage room. The only way to get to the basement was a large, very new red elevator that opened on both sides. The woman who trained me on serving the apartments had told stories of a little girl in a red dress who ran through the halls and haunted the storage room. This woman later quit because of her experiences in this basement. Though I have never seen the little girl, I would often experience the intense chilling feeling of being watched when putting trash and recyclables in the bins by the storage area. It was a long dark room with a single light in the aisles between the storage cages. There was always this extremely heavy feeling in your chest when you went into that room. Something felt gross and unnatural about it. Many of us felt extremely uncomfortable to the point we began taking the trash back to the main kitchen rather than going in there at night. However, my personal experiences had begun in the dining area itself. On multiple occasions, paper placemats have been pulled from beneath plates and silverware and have ended up on the floor. And one day, I watched as a very heavy wooden chair was whipped from the table across the room and then turned to face me, as if something was pulling up a seat to watch me set the tables that day. It was easily the most physical evidence of the haunting in that basement. The most sinister was in the elevator. I and 2 others have reported this experience more than once. During the ride down the elevator, it would suddenly grow extremely cold. Then the choking would begin. Completely alone, I have felt a mass press against my back and a hand was wrapped around my throat. It would feel as if whatever it was could reach inside you and squeeze your windpipe shut. I could not breathe or move until the elevator opened and I could return to the residence to finish dinner service. This happened 4 times to me, and at least twice to my mother, who also worked in the kitchen at the time. We could never find an explanation behind whatever it was that haunted the apartments. There had never been death in its walls, or a negative history that was attached to the main building. My mother had known the owner of the property that this extension had been built over and could see no connection that would explain whatever dark entity lived within the elevator and that basement. But whatever it is, makes me very glad I will never go back to that place. I lived in an old 2-bedroom, 3-story walk-up in Toronto in my early 20s. A few days after moving in, my roommate Mike jokingly accused me one morning of banging on the wall between our rooms and pacing the apartment at night. I'd done none of that. We both laughed it off and decided it must have been a dream or noise from another unit. But the noises kept happening, night after night. Then there was a smell. It came at certain times. A cloying, cheap woman's perfume mixed with a damp, musty odor. Imagine an old person's clothes left on a basement floor that's been damp too long, plus the faint reek of a litter box that hasn't been changed. That's what it smelled like. The strange thing was, right before the scent appeared, I'd get this sudden horrible sense of foreboding, like a cold electric hush that filled the room for a few seconds. Then the smell would be there, thick and impossible to ignore. 4 months into our 1-year lease, Mike flaked and moved out. That left me paying rent by myself until I could find someone new. Not long after he left, I decided to try sleeping in his old room to see if anything changed. The first night I slept there, I had a nightmare so vivid it felt real. I was standing in our dimly lit bathroom, staring into a broken mirror. In the dream, I lifted a large shard of glass and cut my own face. The mirror was only broken in the dream, but the panic felt like a physical weight. I woke up shaking. Not long after that, the loud bangs returned. I started hearing the toilet flush in the middle of the night. Several times, the hot water in the bathtub would turn on full blast without anyone in the apartment. It was the little ordinary things happening at the wrong time, and that made them feel wrong in a way you can't explain. One of the creepiest moments came shortly before I moved out. I was jolted awake at about 2 in the morning by my TV blasting Poltergeist. Back then, the channel did late night movies, but the timing was uncanny. The one night my analog TV, the kind where you twist knobs to change channels and pull to turn it on, switched itself on at full volume. It chose Poltergeist, the movie about a house with a violent, unexplained phenomena. The coincidence felt like a line being drawn. I moved not long after. Looking back, the apartment wasn't violent in that classic sense. It was mostly small invasions. A smell that settled into the sheets, the sudden bang of a wall, the faucet that turned itself on. But the little things added up. They changed the way I slept, the way I moved through my own home. And sometimes late at night, I still remember that metallic tang of fear right before the smell would come. That tiny, impossible warning. Have a paranormal experience of your own? Share it with us at officialphantom.mic@gmail.com. Whether in text or voice recording, we want to hear your story. Thank you for tuning in to Phantom Mike. And remember, if you still feel alone, you weren't listening closely enough.